The air in the room feels thick, heavy, like storm clouds gathering inside these four walls. I watch his face, the way the color drains from it, starting around his lips, spreading upwards like a gray frost. His eyes, moments ago gleaming with smug anticipation, are now wide, unseeing, fixed on the screen in my hand. The casual smirk he wore just seconds ago is gone, replaced by something slack, something terrified. His breathing changes, a sharp, involuntary gasp, then nothing. For a beat, I think he's stopped breathing altogether. He's frozen. Absolutely, completely frozen. Like a statue carved from ice, and the ice is melting from the inside out. The silence stretches, taut and unforgiving, broken only by the frantic, panicked beating of my own heart, a drumroll for a victory I wasn't sure I'd ever see. This is it. The moment where his world stops spinning, and mine finally starts. Let me know where you're watching from, and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, it helps me more than you know. Life before felt like a slow current, pulling me gently downstream. Not towards anything specific, just along. I had my routines, my small comforts. The morning light through the kitchen window, the smell of coffee, the weight of the old cat on my lap in the evenings. I worked part-time, enough to feel useful, enough for pocket money that was technically ours anyway. My husband, Mark, he was the anchor, the fixed point in our shared universe. He had the career, the big salary, the important meetings. He was the provider, the one who handled the finances, who made the decisions about our future, our home improvements, our holidays. He wasn't cruel, not in the way that makes headlines. There were no raised fists, no shouting matches that shook the foundations. His methods were quieter, more insidious. A well-placed sigh, a condescending smile, a dismissive wave of the hand. He built a subtle cage around me, made of comfortable routines and quiet limitations. My ideas were cute, my worries were trivial, my opinions were sweet. He handled the big stuff. I wasn't sure what I handled, other than the smooth running of the house and the careful navigation of his moods. Inside, though, there was a flicker, a small, persistent spark of something more. I had ideas, things I wanted to try, skills I wanted to build. I spent hours online, researching, learning. It felt like a secret life, one he didn't know about and probably wouldn't care about. It was just me and the quiet hum of the computer and the endless possibilities the internet offered. It felt like breathing fresh air for the first time in years. The idea came to me slowly at first, a whisper that grew into a persistent hum. It was niche, unconventional. It involved connecting people who needed a very specific, specialized service with people who could provide it, using a platform that didn't exist yet in this way. It wasn't glamorous, but I saw a need, a gap in the market. More than that, I saw a way to build something mine, something that could stand on its own. I spent months researching, sketching out plans, figuring out the logistics. It consumed my evenings, my weekends. I pored over spreadsheets late into the night, the soft glow of the laptop screen illuminating a world he didn't inhabit. I felt a nervous energy, a mixture of excitement and pure, unadulterated fear. One evening, I gathered my courage. The numbers were rough, the plan was still raw, but I had to tell him. I needed his support, or at least I thought I did. We were sitting across from each other at the dinner table, the kind of quiet evening that usually felt comfortable, but suddenly felt charged with unspoken possibility. I laid it all out, the market research, the potential clients, the business model. My voice was a little shaky at first, but as I spoke, a genuine enthusiasm took over. I talked about the platform, how it would work, the problems it would solve for people. I talked about the potential. He listened, head tilted slightly, a faint, unreadable expression on his face. He didn't interrupt. That should have been a sign. Mark always interrupted when he was engaged, even just to correct a minor point. The silence felt like a held breath. When I finished, I waited. The quiet stretched, the only sound the soft clinking of silverware as he pushed a pea around his plate. Then he looked up, and he smiled. Not a warm smile, but a slow, pitying one. Honey, he said, his voice dripping with faux concern. That's sweet.
Sweet.
The word landed like a small, heavy stone in my gut. Sweet. I echoed, the enthusiasm draining away, replaced by a chill.
Yes.
Like a hobby, he gestured vaguely with his fork. You know, something to keep you busy. I tried to explain, to show him the projections, the market size. It's not a hobby, Mark. It's a real business. It could be profitable. He chuckled softly. Profitable? Darling, do you have any idea what profitable means in the real world? What my world is like? He leaned back in his chair, confidence radiating off him like heat. Building something like this, it takes capital, connections, experience, things you don't have. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. The air was getting colder. Look, he continued, his tone shifting slightly, becoming more direct, almost clinical. I appreciate the effort. Really. It's nice you're finding something you're passionate about. But let's be realistic. This is complicated. It's risky. The kind of thing that eats money faster than you can blink. And then he delivered the line. The one that would echo in my head for months. The one that became the fuel for everything that came after. He looked me dead in the eye, that condescending smile firmly in place, and he said, You'll sink whatever little bit you scrape together, and you'll be begging me for help before you know it. Begging me to cover your losses, begging me to just go back to normal. Just drop it now. Save yourself the heartache. And save us the trouble. You'll be begging me soon. Begging me. The words twisted something inside me. It wasn't just dismissal, it was a prophecy of failure, delivered with a side of veiled threat. He wasn't just saying he didn't believe in me. He was saying he expected me to fail, that he would be waiting, ready to swoop in and remind me of my place, of my dependence on him. That was the inciting incident. Not the idea for the business, but the venom in his words, the absolute certainty of my failure, the casual cruelty of his prediction. I didn't argue. I couldn't. The air had gone from cold to icy. I just nodded, picking at my food, feeling a lump form in my throat. But something had shifted. The spark inside me wasn't just threatened. It was hardened. It was no longer about building something I wanted. It was about proving him wrong. About never having to beg. Starting felt impossible. He controlled the finances, the joint accounts. Every expenditure, even small ones, was under his implicit scrutiny. My part-time wage was barely enough for groceries and my own few personal needs. Capital? Connections? Experience? He was right, I didn't have them. Not in the way he meant. My early struggles were clandestine, fought in the quiet hours when he was asleep or at work. I used free online tools, learned basic coding through tutorials, built a rudimentary website on a cheap hosting plan. I started reaching out to people, tentatively at first, explaining my idea. I faced rejection, skepticism. Sounds complicated. How will you make money? Are you sure you know what you're doing? Each setback felt like a validation of Mark's prophecy. He noticed the changes, though. The late nights, the intensity in my eyes when I talked about my idea, even though I tried to keep it minimal. He didn't ask questions, he just made comments. Passive-aggressive little jabs. Still playing on your little website? Or, hope you're not spending too much of your allowance on this fantasy. He'd leave printouts of articles about startup failures on the coffee table, circled in red pen. He'd sigh dramatically when he saw me working, muttering about things being neglected. He didn't forbid me, not outright. That would have been too direct. His way was to make the environment so hostile, so draining, that I would give up on my own, exhausted and discouraged. He was slowly poisoning the well. The few potential clients I found were hesitant. Without a proven track record, without funding, I looked like a one-woman band playing a tiny, out-of-tune fiddle. I needed to build credibility, but how? I had no budget for marketing, no network to tap into. I felt like I was pushing a boulder uphill with a toothpick. My savings dwindled. Every small purchase for the business felt like a gamble, a direct defiance of his unspoken rules. I started hiding receipts, minimizing my spending elsewhere. It felt like I was stealing from our life together, even though I was using money I had earned. His control was so pervasive it had wormed its way into my own conscience. The late nights blurred into early mornings. Sleep became a luxury. I felt constantly stressed, constantly on edge. The house felt less like a home and more like a battlefield where the weapons were silent judgments and carefully aimed insults. He was wearing me down, piece by piece. And for a while, it felt like it was working. The challenges kept rising, like a tide steadily creeping up the shore. Mark's passive aggression wasn't enough for him. He started actively creating obstacles. He'd forget to pay bills, forcing me to use my meager funds to cover them unexpectedly. He'd suddenly demand I accompany him on last-minute work trips, canceling crucial meetings I had scheduled. He knew exactly when I had a call or a deadline and would choose that moment to demand my attention, a chore be done, or start an irrelevant argument. He started monitoring my online activity, making pointed remarks about the websites I visited. He questioned packages that arrived, asking who they were from and what was in them with an unnerving intensity. He wasn't just unsupportive anymore. He was actively trying to sabotage me, to make the ground beneath my feet crumble. My few early successes were met with silence, or worse, faint praise that felt more damning than criticism. I managed to onboard a couple of beta users who loved the concept. I showed him the feedback, the excited messages. He just shrugged. Pilot programs always look good on paper. Wait until you try scaling it. That's where the real costs hit. He made me doubt everything. My judgment, my sanity, my ability to ever achieve anything meaningful. He would talk about his own successes constantly, his deals, his net worth, his investments, always framing them in contrast to my little project. He'd bring it up in front of friends, disguised as a joke. Oh, yes, my wife's got this adorable little business idea. It's very ambitious, and everyone would laugh, a polite, awkward laughter that made my face burn. He was isolating me, making me feel foolish for daring to dream. The financial pressure was immense. He started making it difficult for me to access even necessary funds. Joint accounts that I could previously transfer from required his approval for anything beyond a small threshold. He claimed it was financial discipline, but it was clearly about control. I had to ask him for money, explain what it was for, and each time he would ask, "Are you sure you don't need that for your business experiments?" The implication was clear. This was money I would be wasting. I started working longer hours, taking on extra freelance gigs just to fund the business without having to ask him. I was exhausted, strung out, constantly fighting a battle on two fronts, building a business from scratch and defending myself against the person who was supposed to be my partner. I felt like I was drowning, the water rising steadily around my neck. Every breath was a struggle. Then came the night everything felt like it was truly over. A critical piece of software I needed, something I had worked weeks to afford, suddenly had a massive price increase. It was unexpected, devastating. I had the money saved, barely, but it would clean me out. I needed to talk to Mark, explain the situation, maybe ask if he could bridge the gap for just this one thing, a tiny investment that could make a huge difference. It felt like swallowing glass, asking him, but I was desperate. I approached him carefully, laid out the situation, the necessity of the software, the unexpected cost. I kept my voice calm, rational. I presented the numbers, the potential return on investment. He listened, drumming his fingers on the table. When I finished, he leaned forward, his expression unreadable for a moment. Hope, a fragile, desperate thing, flickered inside me. Maybe, just maybe, he would see this as a turning point, a chance to actually support me. Then he smiled. It was the same slow, pitying smile from months ago, but colder now, sharper. "So," he said, his voice soft, dangerously soft. "The little business hits a snag?" "It's not a snag, it's just an unexpected cost. It's vital, Mark." He chuckled. "Vital to what? Your little hobby?" "Honey, this is what I told you. These things are expensive. They fail." He shook his head, a picture of disappointment. "And you want me to throw good money after bad?" "It's not bad money. Look at the projections, the user feedback. Projections, he scoffed. User feedback. That's not real-world business, darling. Real-world business has margins, overheads, investors who demand returns, not pats on the back. He stood up, walking over to the window, his back to me. I told you this was a fantasy. I told you you'd be in over your head. He turned back, and his eyes were hard, devoid of any warmth.
No.
I'm not giving you the money. In fact, he paused, and a cruel twist appeared on his lips. I think it's time we got serious about our actual financial goals. I'm reallocating some funds. Our funds. The ones you seem to think are limitless. He walked over to his desk, pulled out a document, and slid it across the table. It was a financial statement. It detailed investments he had made, large sums tied up for years. He had deliberately locked away a significant portion of our liquid assets, assets I had believed were available for emergencies, for future plans we discussed. Plans that now seemed entirely his. The timing wasn't a coincidence. He knew I needed access to funds, and he was cutting me off. See, he said, his voice a low purr of victory. This is real money, working for us. Not imaginary money tied up in some online pipe dream. He tapped the document. This is our security. You chasing butterflies online isn't. He paused, letting the weight of his action sink in. Then, he delivered the final blow, echoing his earlier words, but with more malice this time. You've had your fun. It's time to face reality. You'll be coming to me soon, asking for an allowance, begging me to just take care of everything like I always have. The words hit me like physical blows. Begging me. Begging me. This wasn't just about the business anymore. This was about power, about control, about breaking me down until I had no choice but to rely entirely on him. He had engineered this crisis, not just by withholding funds, but by actively trapping them elsewhere. Everything felt lost. My dream, my independence, my future. I felt trapped, cornered, the walls closing in. He was right. How could I possibly continue? How could I fight this? I was sinking, and he was watching, waiting for me to drown. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark. The financial statement Mark had shown me lying on the floor like a death warrant for my dreams. Every word he had spoken echoed in the silence. Begging me. Begging me. He wanted to see me broken, dependent, admitting he was right, and I was wrong. He wanted to erase the spark, the flicker of independence he couldn't control. And then something shifted. Not slowly, but suddenly, like a lightning strike. It wasn't despair that overwhelmed me, but a cold, hard fury. A realization so sharp it stole my breath. This wasn't just about money or a business. This was a war. A war for my autonomy, for my very identity. He hadn't just been unsupportive. He had been actively hostile, strategically dismantling my efforts, cutting off my resources, isolating me. He had been working, quietly, relentlessly, to ensure my failure. The midpoint shift was the moment I stopped seeing him as a dismissive husband and started seeing him as an opponent. An enemy who had declared war not just on my business, but on me. The pain was still there, a deep, raw wound, but underneath it, a new feeling was taking root, a fierce, unwavering determination. I would not beg. Not him. Not ever. His strategy was clear: starve me out. Cut off all resources until I had no choice but to crawl back, defeated. But in his arrogance, in his absolute certainty of my failure, he had overlooked something crucial. He focused on the money I didn't have, the capital I couldn't access. He didn't see what I had. What I had was the idea itself, refined by months of relentless effort. I had the platform, basic as it was, that I had built with my own hands. I had a small but dedicated group of beta users who loved the concept. And crucially, I had an intimate understanding of the niche, the people who needed the service, their pain points, their willingness to pay. I knew how to reach them, even without a massive marketing budget. The turning point was the decision to stop fighting him on his terms, the terms of capital and traditional business models, and start fighting him on mine. My terms were innovation, connection, and leveraging the unique value proposition he dismissed as a hobby. His greatest weapon was his control over our shared wealth. My greatest weapon was the business itself, the very thing he believed was my weakness. I pulled out the financial statement he had shown me. The figures swam before my eyes. Millions tied up, inaccessible. He thought he was locking me out. But looking at those numbers, a different thought formed, cold and clear. If my business could generate a fraction of that, just a tiny percentage of that kind of wealth, what would that look like? And more importantly, how would that make him feel? The idea wasn't just to succeed anymore. It was to succeed on a scale that would make his smug calculations obsolete. My plan solidified. It was risky, requiring everything I had learned, every ounce of energy I had left. It involved a massive, unconventional marketing push directly targeting the core user base I knew so well. It involved launching the platform fully, even with its imperfections, and relying on word of mouth, virality, and offering an irresistible value proposition that cut through the noise. It required me to be fearless, relentless, and to stop caring about his opinion or his obstacles. He wanted me to beg? I would build an empire instead. And I would do it with the only resources he couldn't take away: my idea, my effort, and my absolute refusal to yield. The launch was a blur. Days and nights bled into one another. I poured every ounce of energy, every last dollar I had earned from freelance work, into getting the platform live and telling the world about it. I used social media, targeted online communities, reached out to influencers in the niche, anyone who would listen. It wasn't a slick, expensive campaign. It was raw, authentic, speaking directly to the needs I knew were out there. Mark barely noticed. He was busy with his own deals, basking in the glow of his financial discipline. He saw me working constantly, but he interpreted it as frantic, last-ditch efforts before the inevitable collapse. His comments became less frequent, replaced by a quiet, watching expectancy. He was waiting for the begging to begin. But something unexpected happened. The response was overwhelming. The need I had identified was even greater than I had anticipated. People flocked to the platform. Users signed up in droves. The value proposition resonated instantly. The fees were low, the service was exactly what they had been looking for, and the platform worked. Word spread like wildfire within the niche community. My phone started buzzing constantly, notifications of new signups, transactions, positive feedback pouring in. The numbers on my dashboard, the ones I had built myself, started climbing. Slowly at first, then faster and faster. Exponentially. It was like watching a plant I had carefully nurtured suddenly explode with growth. I worked harder than ever, onboarding new providers, refining the platform based on user feedback, handling customer service. I was exhausted, but the exhaustion was different now. It wasn't the soul-crushing fatigue of battling Mark's negativity. It was the exhilarating exhaustion of building something real, something that was working. I kept the numbers quiet. I didn't flaunt the success, not yet. I wanted to wait. I watched the revenue climb, watched the user base expand. The initial trickle of money became a steady stream, then a river. I opened a dedicated business account, keeping it entirely separate. Mark knew nothing about it. He was still operating under the assumption that I was burning through my meager freelance earnings on a failed experiment. He would occasionally ask, with a saccharine sweetness, "So, how's the little business going?" Still playing around with that. I would just smile and say, "It's coming along." He interpreted my reticence as embarrassment about my failure. The moment arrived almost accidentally. Mark was on a call, bragging loudly to someone about his financial portfolio, his latest investments, his net worth. He threw around numbers, confident and dismissive, talking about real assets and serious money. He mentioned a specific figure, the total valuation of his holdings, something I had only ever heard in abstract terms before. It was a large number, one that had always felt impossibly distant. He finished the call, puffing up slightly, turning to me with that familiar smirk. "See, darling? That's what success looks like. Millions working for you.
Not.
Whatever it is you're doing." I was sitting at the kitchen table, my laptop open. My business dashboard was on the screen. I had just pulled the latest report. The numbers were staggering, even to me. I looked up at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel small or defeated. I felt
Calm.
and incredibly powerful. "Mark," I said, my voice quiet. He looked at me, ready for the inevitable sigh, the admission of defeat he was so sure was coming. His smirk was fixed in place. "Yes, darling," he asked, his tone patronizing, ready to admit it was a nice try, but I didn't let him finish. I turned my laptop screen towards him. "Look at this, Mark," I said. He glanced at the screen, his eyes scanning the numbers. He saw revenue, he saw users, he saw figures that were much larger than he expected for my little hobby. The smirk faltered. He stepped closer, leaning in, his eyes widening as he processed the scale of the numbers. He saw the growth rate. He saw the total revenue generated in just the last few months. He saw the valuation estimates I had been sent by interested parties, estimates that had started appearing after the viral growth. His face went pale. The color drained away, leaving it a sickly gray. His eyes, which had held such smug confidence moments before, were now bulging, fixed on the screen as if hypnotized. He stood there, frozen, the air leaving his lungs in a sharp gasp. The number that seemed to break him was the valuation. It was conservative, an early estimate, but it was real. And it was 3 times larger than the number he had just boasted about as his total net worth. 3 times. Overnight, the thing he had mocked, the thing he had tried to sabotage, the thing he was certain would lead to me begging at his feet, was worth 3 times everything he had spent his life building. He stumbled back a step, knocking against a chair. It clattered to the floor, the sound unnervingly loud in the silent room. He didn't seem to notice. His gaze was still locked on the screen, his mouth slightly agape. He looked utterly blindsided, as if he had walked into a wall he didn't know was there. The carefully constructed world where he was the successful one, the capable one, the provider, the one with all the power, had just imploded. He wasn't just surprised. He was broken. The foundation of his identity, built on being superior, on being the one I depended on, had just crumbled. He had been so certain of my failure, so confident in his control, that the reality of my massive, undeniable success was physically, viscerally shattering to him. He was frozen in the face of a reality he had refused to believe in, a reality I had built specifically to defy him. This wasn't just success, it was vindication on a scale I hadn't fully grasped until I saw his face. I had won, and I hadn't had to beg anyone for anything. He stayed frozen for a long moment, the silence stretching tight. When he finally spoke, his voice was a hoarse whisper, barely recognizable.
How?
"How did you?" I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. The numbers spoke for themselves. I watched him, the collapse of his arrogance, the dawning horror in his eyes. There was no triumph in me, not really. Just a quiet, bone-deep satisfaction. And a profound sadness for the years wasted, for the partnership that was never truly won, for the man who had actively tried to diminish me instead of lifting me up. He stumbled away from the table, running a hand through his hair, looking lost. The fight had drained out of him completely. He tried to argue, to pick apart the numbers, to claim it was a fluke, unsustainable. But his voice lacked conviction. He knew he had underestimated me, mocked me, sabotaged me, and in doing so, he had created the very force that had now eclipsed him entirely. The aftermath wasn't explosive. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation. It was quieter, more definitive. The foundation of our marriage, already cracked by his control and disdain, shattered completely under the weight of this new reality. He couldn't live with my success, especially success on this scale, and especially because it came from the thing he had dismissed. And I couldn't live with the knowledge of his betrayal, the deliberate cruelty of his actions. I moved out a few weeks later. The business allowed me to do it easily, smoothly. I didn't need his money, his permission, or his approval. I was free. The house felt empty without him, but it also felt clean, purged of the toxic air he had created. My business continued to grow, exceeding even the initial estimates. It became more than just a platform. It became a community, a space where people found solutions and support. It was profitable, sustainable, and incredibly rewarding. It was everything he said it couldn't be. People sometimes ask about the key to my success. They expect a complicated business strategy, a secret marketing trick. I tell them about the market gap, the value proposition. But the real answer is simpler and much more brutal. The key was his certainty in my failure. The key was him telling me I would beg. That line became the fuel, the relentless energy that drove me through every setback, every moment of doubt. Every time I felt like giving up, I heard his voice. And I refused. I refused to beg. Leaving him wasn't just leaving a marriage, it was leaving a narrative he had tried to impose on me, a story where I was the dependent, the incapable one. I stepped out of his story and into my own, a story I wrote with my own hands, fueled by fire and a refusal to yield. The scar is still there, the memory of the mockery, the betrayal. But it's a reminder not of what I lost, but of what I gained. My freedom, my strength, and a future I built entirely on my own terms. And the knowledge that sometimes the most powerful currency isn't money, but sheer, unadulterated defiance. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.